Hello all. This week we will cover Chapter 9, Motivation and Emotion. In Part 1, we will discuss about different types of motivation, the drive reduction theory, how our anxiety influences our motivation and performance, and lastly about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-determination theory. So first, what is motivation? Motivation is a force that moves people to behave, think, and feel the way they do. So if we add motivation to a person who always feels tired and doesn't want to go to work, the individual would look like this. So in a sense, motivation is pretty similar to how we use it in our everyday language, which is not always the case in psychology. So there are several different types of motivation. One type of motivation is called extrinsic motivation, where the motivation is based on the external factors. So have you ever given yourself a reward such as a really good ice cream after getting a good grades or after working out so hard? Or what could be your motivation to work? So these are examples of extrinsic motivation. So of these 7 different approaches, which one of these best describes extrinsic motivation? This should be relatively straightforward. For example, why do dogs learn to do tricks? Because of the treats or the food that they get. So extrinsic motivation is similar to the concept of operant conditioning, and therefore behavioral approach would probably best describe extrinsic motivation. Another type of motivation is called intrinsic motivation, where the motivation is based on our internal factors. For example, what are some of the reasons that you're attending classes? Some might say because to get a good grade and to be able to graduate college. This again is an example of extrinsic motivation. But there may be students who are attending the lecture because of curiosity and the drive of wanting to know about psychology. Or if you have hobbies, like reading a book or playing some kind of sports, why are you engaging in those activities? What is the motivation? Probably because it's fun. So these are examples of intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation are known to be more powerful compared to extrinsic motivation because the motives of doing something is coming from inside of you and you don't need any external rewards. Our behaviors could also be explained by our instincts, which is the innate biological patterns of behavior. So for example, in the developmental chapter, you learn the different reflexes of an infant, such as grasping, stepping, and sucking. These behaviors could be explained using instinct approaches. And as you can imagine, of the 7 psychology approaches, this is related to the evolutionary approach of psychology. Next, how can we explain our motivation for our physiological needs, for example, hunger? Using the drive reduction theory of motivation, we first need to understand 2 concepts. First, there is a need, which is a state of deprivation of physiological need. And then there is a drive, which aims to satisfy physiological needs such as hunger, thirst, and sex. So in other words, behavior arises from physiological needs that cause the drive to satisfy the need. So if there is no need, then there is no drive. For example, say you're hungry. According to the drive reduction theory, does it make sense to eat a slice of pizza? Yes, because you're hungry, so there is a drive to satisfy the need of hunger. How about you are so hungry but you don't like broccoli? Does it make sense to eat broccoli? This might be a trick question, but according to the theory, yes, it does make sense, because when there is a need, then there will be a drive to satisfy the need even though that might be the food you don't like. How about when you're full? Does it make sense to eat any food? No, this does not make sense because there is no need to satisfy. So the goal of the drive reduction theory is to achieve homeostasis, which is body's tendency to maintain a steady state in which the body functions effectively. So we want to maintain the state when our needs are all met, and if they are not, then there is a need to satisfy the need, and therefore we will have the drive to satisfy those unmet needs. Oh, and there's a definition of homeostasis. Next, we're going to discuss about motivation from the arousal approach. So arousal is the feeling of being alert and engaged. If you have minimal arousal, then you might be bored or feeling indifferent. And if you have really high arousal, then you will be super alert and probably with really high anxiety. So, how does the level of arousal influence our performance? What do you think? So if you were going to give out a presentation in a class, you probably do not want to be bored or indifferent. And you probably do not want to be too anxious. So you probably want to be somewhere in the middle. So here's the figure that represents what we just discussed. The x-axis is the level of arousal. So if you are on the far left side, then that indicates low arousal, and if you go on the right, then your arousal level increases. And the y-axis is the level of performance. So you could see that either extreme side of the arousal are showing weak performance, but the moderate level of arousal is where we can maximize our performance. So this is called Yerkes-Dodson law, where again, it shows performance is best under moderate arousal rather than either low or high. So when you're about to perform something, try to lower your arousal level if it's too high, or there may be times you need to increase your level of arousal when your arousal is too low, where you're feeling indifferent and bored. So we talked about motivation, but what kinds of needs are there for humans to satisfy? You might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but according to this model, which looks like this, there are 5 needs that humans strive to satisfy. And not everyone will be able to satisfy all 5 needs, and in fact, many will stop after fulfilling the 4th need, which is the esteem. And also know that these needs must be satisfied in the following sequence, from the bottom to the top. The last need is called self-actualization, and to satisfy this need, people need to have satisfied the lower needs and achieved full human potential, which means that not only are the individual feeling good about themselves and what they have accomplished, but individuals are also using their resources and power for the greater good. So some examples that have satisfied the self-actualization are people we learn in classes and books, such as Nelson Mandela, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Dalai Lama. So these are just examples of people who have satisfied self-actualization. However, there are criticisms to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Earlier, I said that these needs must be met in order from bottom up. However, could individuals skip the order and satisfy the upper needs? For example, it may be possible for some to satisfy esteem without satisfying love and belongingness. But this is not what Maslow originally intended, and is said to be one of the criticisms. And also know that even working in a high-paying occupation, such as a lawyer or a medical doctor, for example, if one is working to pay for physiological needs, such as paying for food or rent, then they are said to be in the lowest of hierarchy of needs. So basically physiological needs. So the occupation does not matter per se, and so don't get fooled just because a person is working as a medical doctor or really, president of the company. If again they're paying for the rent or food, then they are at the physiological need. So you might say that at this point you get that there are various human needs, but what are the underlying motives in satisfying higher needs? So we could explain this using what is called self-determination theory, which is a theory developed by Deci and Ryan in 2000. So what this theory says is that there are three basic motives which exist in every person. So these are universal. So first, as a human, there is a desire of wanting to become competent in bringing the outcome we want. So we want to feel confident and be good at doing something and being able to overcome, for example, obstacles. Next, there is a desire of wanting to engage in warm relation. And last, we want to feel a sense of autonomy, having a sense of control in our life. And if we satisfy all these three needs, what do you think would happen? It leads to intrinsic motivation. So when you make a goal, think of these three needs, because again, intrinsic motivation is more powerful than extrinsic motivation. So that's all I got for part 1 of chapter 9, motivation and emotion. And again, if you have any questions, post it on Q&A. Otherwise, I will see you in part 2 of the video. Thanks and take care.